Okay, looks like we're live. I'm Dan Pennell. I'm the CEO here at WMTEK. We're so excited that you have joined us for today's webinar. We're going to be looking at 10 years of learning, unveiling a decade of conversion. And definitely glad you guys are all here. Stick around. We do have at the end of the webinar, we'll be raffling off an Old Florida Coffee Co. gift pack with a bag of delicious fresh roasted coffee beans and some other goodies in there. And so you need to be attending in the webinar to be a recipient of that raffle. So make sure you're here toward the end of the webinar. We'll go for about 45 minutes on the presentation. We'll take a few minutes at the end for question and answer. You can put your questions into the chat, and then our team will be selecting questions that we will tackle at the end of the presentation. So again, thank you for being here today. Let's get into it. You can see my slides below, and we'll get started. All right, so wanted to talk to you as we talk about 10 years of learning and kind of unveiling the analytics and the information that we have gotten from that, and some of the good outcomes that takeaways we've gotten from that. I wanted to give you some context for what we're talking about. We're talking about basically just about 10 years now live on the SiteStacker 2+ platform. And that has been largely, missionary sending agencies for the full 10 years of that span. And for about the last 5 years of that span, child sponsorship organizations. And so it's a fairly tight group that we're talking about. Now for child sponsorship, you can kind of see when we implemented child sponsorship on the SiteStacker platform, we were doing our product prep kind of through 2017 up until about mid 2018. We started kind of making child sponsorship as a use case on SiteStacker, available to the child sponsorship organizations in 2018, and we continue to do that today. And this is kind of what that has looked like for us. So you can kind of see starting in 2018, we have gone on a pretty steady, straight up growth trajectory to where, as of today, about 24% of US-based child sponsorship organizations are using the SiteStacker, platform. And I think it's probably about the fastest growing software platform of its type amongst child sponsorship organizations for sure. And so some things we've seen reported, because we automate so many of the otherwise very cumbersome child sponsorship processes. It's been reported back to us that when a child sponsorship kind of fully automates all the workflows and incorporates all the things, the goodies and stuff that we do in SiteStacker, that they report between a 60 and 80% decrease in back office workload in the management functionality or the management functions of running a child sponsorship org. And let's see, I wanted to actually go here. Let's talk about I'll come back to those two slides. I wanted to talk about our missionary sending agencies. In the Missio Nexus report for 2022 showed us that U.S. sending agencies had what they estimated to be, of the ones they evaluated, a combined revenue of about $2.2 billion. So that's kind of about the size of the effort, if you want to put it that way, of U.S.-based missionary sending is about $2.2 billion in combined revenue. And then based on that same 2022 reporting that we were able to obtain, that the missionary sending agencies that use SiteStacker as a platform represent about 1.4 billion of that revenue. So SiteStacker is a platform right now. You can kind of see the growth trajectory. We started offering SiteStacker as a platform to missionary sending agencies back in mid 2013, and now you can see kind of what that growth rate has looked like. We've had a significant upturn even in the last 2 years, probably our strongest growth in the history of our company. And if you were to, based on what we're seeing right now, if you were to kind of keep going with this chart, I think we actually are in an even stronger growth cycle now than we ever have been. So it's definitely going to be another kind of a straight up line there for sure. And that's just kind of the reason I'm pointing this out is that this is the basis of the data we're going to be looking at. It's those 63% of missionary sending agencies, those 24% of child sponsorship organizations over that 10-year period. And over that same 10-year period, I thought this is an interesting statistic to share, is that SiteStacker as a platform has a 97% customer retention rate. And of course, we're very excited about that. That's a good news for the clients and the organizations we serve, and it's good news for us. When software as a service platforms are averaging a 30 to 50% what we call churn rate, meaning that they plan to lose 30 to 50% of all of their customers every year. We have lost 3% over the entire 10-year period of the offering of our platform. So definitely a different kind of a thing going on there. All right, so with that being said, let's dig into the analytics and look at what we've learned. And so one of the things that we want to look at is a major endeavor we took on early on in the very beginning of building the SiteStacker platform, of fixing the online fundraising donor experience. And we've learned a lot in this area, and we're still learning, but there's definitely some really cool stuff to share. So you're seeing here kind of a screenshot. It would have been animated, but right now I can't animate it with the current webinar software. So, but it kind of shows what the Wycliffe website looked like back in 2011, maybe 2012. Actually, I see right there the 2012, 2013 gift catalog represented right there at the top. And this was their giving page, and there's a little drop-down menu there. And the way you would kind of pick a fund or a missionary that you wanted to give to is you just had to pick from a list, and the titles on the list were deprecated. It was very difficult. And then there were 7 or 8 different, clicks that you would have to make to complete your gift. And the long story short was that this was not abnormal for missionary sending agencies. In fact, this is probably one of the better online giving experiences back in 2012. And so we were seeing organizations that really didn't have a very good foot forward in terms of online giving. It was a lot of piecemeal, and we were seeing attrition or abandonment rates upwards of 90% back then, where if 100 people tried to make a gift online, 90 of them quit and only 10 would actually complete the gift. This is that same organization, Wycliffe Bible Translators Today. This is the site that is fully functioning on SiteStacker that was launched just a couple of months ago. You can see this is the difference here. You can do so many amazing things, and there's many differences I won't get into, but you can pick whether you're giving monthly or once. You can pick by preset amounts. You can opt and choose whether to increase, to add on the cost of processing, and you can do it all within kind of one really easy to deal with scenario. And then from there, you get into an easy one-click checkout environment. And this is a reasonable showcase of just kind of like, there's a lot obviously that's been living between what was going on back then and what's going on now, and how we got from where we started to here. But the bottom line is there's a world of difference. And what we've seen are some incredible kind of performance gains. So, and we'll share what those performance gains are. But we continue to be very strategic about monitoring outcomes for the organizations we serve, putting in intelligent and well thought out strategies that are designed to convert more of what we're trying to do from the position of our websites in particular. And that would be missionary support, child sponsorship outcomes, general giving outcomes, mobilization, and recruiting outcomes, just to name a few. But one of the reasons why the data we're sharing is so accurate is not only that it was taken over a 10-year period, but because the data set now includes over $1.75 billion of funds raised in online gifts for missionary sending agencies and child sponsorship organizations. So it's a pretty big data set. By the numbers, here's what we've kind of found out is the SiteStacker approach combined to all the other approaches that we've seen in the market that we've replaced is that the all-time average for SiteStacker, the way we do online giving, is we have an all-time average of all organizations of 82%, which is really, really high. In fact, one of the things we do is we do an analytical evaluation for just about every client we have before they leave their old system, whatever that might have been, and their old online giving donor management system. And we do an analysis of that, and we track what their conversion rates were before. And then later on, we come back and track what their new conversion rates are in SiteStacker. And the difference, quite frankly, is staggering. All-time conversion rates for all other systems combined has been 13%. And in SiteStacker, it's 82%. So there's a massive difference there. It reflects a 69% increase over 10 years and $1.75 billion of gifts. And so I'd say these numbers are pretty settled in. There's not a lot of variance in them anymore. And it allows us to be, quite predictive in what's going to happen with online giving. This slide just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of how some of the other systems that we often replace have performed over those 10 years by our internal analysis. And by the way, it's completely apples to apples. We do the analytical review exactly the same way, to be fair and to be, very transparent. So it's totally apples to apples. Now, some of these systems, like for instance, Salesforce would be an example, is not an online giving system per se. So what this would really represent is they might be Salesforce plus some other online giving plugin or something like that. This would represent all of the various plugins or add-ons that the orgs that we have replaced Salesforce for were using before they came to SiteStacker. Whereas with Blackbaud, they have their own online giving system. But you can kind of see the orange bar here has been our all-time conversion average for SiteStacker. And then here are the conversion rates for all these other kind of systems. So that's been kind of interesting. Now, with that being said, here's the big question mark that kind of comes up is if you were an organization who was working on growing, if you're an organization who has a strategic effort to kind of increase your giving, to increase your donations, what would happen is if you have had a decade of 13% conversion, or if you've had a 5 to 10 years of 82% conversion, the problem you would be trying to solve would be a different problem. All right. And so I put a conversion funnel here, an upside down pyramid. The whole idea is that a bunch of whatever it is we're trying to do comes in at the top, and then a smaller amount actually, finalizes at the bottom, right? So you're familiar with that concept. Now, and again, the takeaway is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Are we trying to get more outcome at the bottom or more opportunity in at the top? And again, if you're converting 13% at the bottom, then you're probably focusing on how to get more opportunity in the top. If you're converting 82% at the bottom, then it's a whole different ballgame. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because I think there's some dynamics here that we need to get a grip on as an industry, as a missional group, right? Which we consider ourselves obviously to be a partner in. So if your conversion rate is 13%, okay, then that means essentially out of all the organic opportunity that came into this funnel through the various efforts you may have to nurture that opportunity, 80% of that is lost. All right. It comes in, you had an opportunity to do something with it. The opportunity was lost and it flows back out over the top. That means the vast majority of the organic opportunities you have to grow your organization, to increase your revenue and to increase your donor profile and your engagement profile, the vast majority of those opportunities are lost. They go away. And that's interesting. So let's take that and do a case study. Let's just think about that logically for a minute. If you had 100,000 people that you were able to engage with your website, as an example, you've curated this interest. Maybe some of the people came to your website because they met one of your mobilization reps on a college campus. Maybe other ones came because that, they searched for certain things on Google. Maybe someone else came because they are a supporter of a missionary and they want to find out more about what you do. But 100,000 people come to the website, and then you averaged the all-time average of all of our clients, what they were averaging before they came to SiteStagger. That's just industry average. That's 13%. So we can settle then that if we left things the way they were, we'd have 13,000 donations at the bottom of that funnel. Okay. Now, if that was what was going on with such slow conversion, what we have seen is most organizations don't identify that as the problem. What they identify is revenue as the problem, or they identify mobilization opportunities, engaged candidates. Like, in other words, we don't have enough engaged candidates. And you go, well, why don't you have enough engaged candidates? And they go, well, because churches aren't the way they used to be. Okay, maybe that's it. Or we're not getting donors in the way we used to. Well, why aren't we getting donors in? Well, because the economy's bad. Okay, maybe, right? So what will happen is if you're only converting 13%, what we've seen is you'll focus on kind of the core thing. Like, we're not getting enough opportunities. We're not getting enough revenue. And so what would happen is you'll start to try to solve that problem. Well, how do we get more revenue? Well, if we're losing that many donors, and I saw one company say that on average, nonprofits are losing 76% of all their new donors. That's not a number we've seen in the last decade, but I've seen that claimed. And if that's the way, now, if you're losing 87% right out of the top of your funnel, then maybe that is the case. Maybe we're just failing to engage the opportunities we already have. And then if the issue we're trying to solve then is, well, how do we get more opportunities? How do we get more revenue? We go, well, how do we go back and try to reclaim some of that was lost? So if you follow what I'm saying, then what we would do is we'd go back here and we go, man, we lost 87% of these without converting. How do we go get it? Well, we could put responsive fundraising or responsive messaging into play, where we're building out like messaging automations, email and text programs. We're doing donor profiling and wealth screening. And I'm not saying any of that's bad, but essentially that takes time. It takes effort. It takes knowledge to do all of those things. And generally speaking, if that's the way we're going to get more revenue, then we'll be all in on that. And that is ultimately whatever we can get from that is what we'll have. We won't get anything else. And if we were to do that, the very best organizations in the industry that I have found claim that they can get about 12% gain if you use their program, their platform, their software to go out and try to reclaim what was lost with the original issue with conversion. All right. If you did that and you reached 12,000 of the 69,000 lost donations from the original abandonment, that would bump you by 8,200 more, and you'd get 21,000. And that would be 21% conversion. So after all of that time, all of that effort, all of the skill set that's involved in trying to produce that outcome, you would get up to 21% engagement. And what would happen is that wouldn't be enough. And so as a result of that not being enough, you'd go, well, what do we do now? We still need more. I don't know how we're going to get more, because 100,000 wasn't enough. We now got 21,000 of the 100,000, but it wasn't good enough. How do we get it? So what we would do is go, well, maybe we need a better SEO strategy with our website. Maybe we need to do an AdWords program. Maybe we need to build a bigger social media program. Now, again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having good SEO or buying AdWords or having a great social media structure. What I am saying is if you're trying to fill the gap that was lost all the way back here, you'll never fill it that way. That's the problem, is if that's what you're trying to do, you'll never accomplish that goal. It will not happen, not through that method. And because what will happen is, in order to have better SEO, you're going to have to build your website in a way where it's not clear, where getting the outcomes is more muddy, not more clear, is less likely, not more likely. In actuality, by getting better SEO, you might be able to get more people into the top of this funnel. You'll actually very likely decrease your conversion rates at the bottom, because your website, a website that is conditioned to be really good with SEO, is not necessarily a website that is good at getting conversion. That's what we have seen in our experience. So, and then this is what you would actually need. You'd actually have to get 400,000, 4 times more in what I would say opportunities into the top of that funnel in order to get the same outcome you could have had if you had just increased your conversion at the bottom. All right. And so what we are kind of seeing is that the opportunity for our organizations is it possible that a lot of the fundraising strategies and a lot of the places that we put our time and our effort as an organization actually are defined by our lack of ability to convert in the first place? And if we're able to convert, would our strategies now change? And with SiteStacker, that's exactly what we're seeing, is that where we're focusing our efforts in terms of product, in terms of value, in terms of forward movement, isn't necessarily aligning with the rest of the industry. Because if you go back to, and I'm going way back to this slide, remember the conversion? The real reality is none of these companies that are doing fundraising type stuff with nonprofits have anything in place at all that would suggest that they can increase your conversion. They're all talking about increasing maybe your ability, your donor knowledge, your relationship management, and again, all real important stuff, but none of them have any active programs that I'm aware of that would suggest that they're even thinking about conversion. And that's a problem. So whereas SiteStacker, because we have an all-time, going back to this 82% conversion rate, we're like, that problem's already generally solved. So now if that problem's solved, what are the next questions and where do we go from there? And it changes what you would focus on. It changes how you would do things. So you can either try to increase your opportunities, or you can take advantage of the organic opportunities you have. And the starting point is real self-evident. If you had 100,000 opportunities, and the all-time average of every single client that has ever used SiteStacker would be 82,000 conversions coming out of that. 82,000 will always be significantly more than 21,000. Now, what did that leave us with? All the time, the money, the effort, the staffing that we would have used to try to go reclaim that additional 8,000 to get from 13 to 21%, that can all be used for something different. So that's like if I told you I could give you your entire fundraising staff back, what will you do with them? Dream about it. The answer would be different. And that's what these analytics really kind of bear out is, I think organizations who are working on the SiteStacker platform are working from a different position, and these analytics bear that out. But do we know it? And have we accounted for it? And are we now working off of that as a launching pad and a basis? And I think that's really kind of food for thought. Now, you might go, okay, that's general organizational giving and growth. What happens for specific things? Like if I'm a child sponsorship organization, do sponsorships grow? And this is really a cool little chart. It shows 3 organizations randomly picked, one small, one large, one medium. And it shows, generally speaking, whether you're large, small, or medium, it's the same thing. Big spike up in the first year, okay? A full year of growth, big spike up, and so forth year after year. And this is not just organizational giving. This is child sponsorship giving. Now, I'm going to throw one thing out on this, and then you can hang on to that and decide what to do with it. Most of the organizations that we've seen this with didn't have more children to sponsor available. So take that food for thought, okay? And they may or may not have grown exponentially with the number of children that were actually sponsored, but the sponsorship revenue went up. Think about that, and we'll talk about why. Same thing with missionary support. Now, this is 3 organizations randomly picked. One's large, one's medium. Large for us would be an organization, I think of over more than maybe right at the 100 million mark was this org. Medium was an organization between 20 and 60 million. And then small would be an organization of around $10 million in revenue. So we have 3 organizations represented here. This is just missionary support, not all revenue, just missionary support. That's all this is. Now, you can see what happens is from the time SiteStackers launch, overall revenue that comes from missionary support goes up by a lot. In this case, over 100%. The smallest organization, the mid-sized organization went up by 60%, 100%. 115, 20%. That's big gains. Here's the caveat is that all 3 of these organizations did not see exponential growth in the number of missionaries on the field. As a matter of fact, I think one kind of held even, the other one might have shrank a little bit. In other words, they might have lost more missionaries than they gained. And then the other one was kind of net even. And that's where we're seeing missionary organizations right now. We're in a cycle where we're seeing a lot of retirement. We're seeing a lot of missionaries come back from the field for various reasons. And organizations have a challenge to replace the missionaries who are coming back as fast as they're coming back. So we're not seeing massive growth spikes right now in terms of the raw sheer number of missionaries on the field. If we can sustain, we're doing well for a lot of the bigger orgs. Now, the question then it goes, how do you grow missionary support by 100% when you didn't grow the number of missionaries on the field by at least 50 or 60%? How does that happen? And that's the question, right? Here's the answer. It's automated revenue. It's when you go from converting 13% of gifts to 82% gifts, then that's when you see things like our friends at Christar saw, where 10% of all their revenue was coming in from automated online giving before. In 36 months later, 75% of all of their revenue was coming in from automated gifts. Now, the blue line here is if you have a bunch of children who have sponsors, but the sponsors have to mail checks in, what happens over the summer months? The revenue dips. It's always been that way. If you have a bunch of missionaries who are depending on supporters to mail checks in, what happens is their income dips, the revenue dips. If you're a missionary sending agency that has 3,000 missionaries on the field and the revenue dips for all the missionary, then your whole organization's revenue dips. And traditionally what we've seen is a 20 to 40% dip over that 3 to 4 month span through the summer months based on that issue. When you automate, when you convert, some of the organizations we're working with are now 85, 90% of all their revenue is automated. We have organizations that have reported that over 85% of all of their back office staffing requirements is gone. By automating it, they don't have to have an army of people necessarily entering checks. It's a completely different world. But here's the really other thing is that's where you're going to see these 20, 40, even higher percentage gains, is because a big part of our organization's revenue is based on recurrence. And if you can automate the recurrence, you're going to get the gains. Our analytics bear that out, just as it's so deep and so wide, it's just a matter of fact. Something to think about. All right, another thing we have tackled is increasing, efficiency in missionary mobilization. One of the issues that we saw as we worked with missionary sending agencies from a very early point is that there was no real frame of reference for how to mobilize using websites, that most of the mobilization process was living with people or departments, but there was no institutional process. And generally speaking, it's just like we seem to be getting more missionaries, but no one really knows how. I mean, thank God for the people who do it. Whatever they're doing seems to be working, but there was no real organization. There was no real structure to it. That's what we were finding. And there certainly was no kind of process automation kind of an effort going on. And generally speaking, I would say we feel like we're probably the first company that I know of that has tackled this specifically and said, let's make a difference. And the reason I know that is as we have worked with such a high percentage of missionary sending agencies to begin to figure out how do we automate mobilization processes, how do we empower mobilization reps with real-time data and task-based dashboards that synchronize them with what candidates actually need so that we can get them to the field. I mean, some of the stuff that we do, when we do it, we're not replacing anybody. That's what we have found, is we're replacing bubblegum, paper clips, spreadsheets, emails. Most of the organizations we've done this with weren't doing anything. They were just doing, kind of like a conglomeration of whatever they could do. And there was no system to replace. So we're really, I feel like we're kind of front runners on this. And here's what's kind of happened over 10 years. Is Missio Nexus report last year said that they guesstimated about 34,504 missionaries were on the field, short-term, midterm, long-term last year. And then in our analysis, from the time we began to really focus heavily on missionary sending in the SiteStacker platform back around 2016, this is kind of our growth trajectory of missionaries that have been mobilized over those years. Most of them being long-term and midterm. It was really somewhere right in here that we actually added short-term group and trip management. And then 2020 happened. So generally speaking, I would say this is mostly long and midterm, and our estimates are about 15,000 plus missionaries mobilized using our strategies, our dashboards, and our automated processes in SiteStacker. Here's the situation. When we go in to work with an organization to do this mobilization, the process we use, we call business process management. You can Google that. I mean, that's not, didn't come from us. It's just a great way to operate. And the idea is that you're really ultimately going to define your process from the beginning to the end by interviewing and analyzing. So we'll come into the organization we serve. We do all of that. We interview, we analyze, and then we visualize, which is documenting. We document the full project process from the beginning to the end through a visualized chart, and then we infill all the details from there. Most of the organizations we've worked with have told us that's the first time they've ever seen their full process for onboarding missionaries in a visual format like that. Most of the time, departments know what their part of the process is, but as the mobilization process goes from department to department, no one's really clear what may or may not be happening on the other side of the fence. This solves that, and then it allows us for the first time to optimize. And optimizing could be optimizing the process, but we've seen plenty of times that it's like, oh, wow, now that we see that, we actually feel like we need to optimize our team. Maybe we have people in the wrong roles. Maybe we need to do a little rethinking about the structure of our organization. So there's a lot of optimization that's very beneficial that comes from that. And then eventually you automate. Now, in the early years, this has not always gone smooth. Organizations that found great value in getting the structure, some of them have also hit frustration points, and it's been difficult for them to stick with it and or to see it through to the point of high performance. And we have enough data in now that we've been able to evaluate that and kind of identify why. And one of the reasons for sure is that the process that we're visualizing, well, we visualize it and optimize it because it had never been visualized really before. That could very well be a broken process, but nobody knows it. In other words, it's not a well-performing process. And the thing is bad performing processes get really kind of bad results, but it's hard to identify that when no one knows what the process is. You kind of know you're not getting great results, but no one really knows why. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's, who knows what it is, but you don't concentrate on it because you're not sure why. But when you automate the process, it actually can start to reflect back to you, here's what the issue is with this. So if you lock that in and you don't work the BPM process of going back then and modifying that and learning from what you've locked in and then going back and reevaluating it and kind of reperforming the steps, what will happen is you'll just have a bad automated process that gets you bad results faster and more accurately. And it's easy to not realize that's not a software issue. That's this is kind of exposing we need to go back to the drawing board and rethink this a little bit. We've also seen that it's easy once you fall in love with the idea that we can automate lots of stuff. You can automate too much too soon, and then you don't give your team flexibility that they will need to be comfortable with adopting. And that can be a real problem. We didn't understand that as well, 5 years ago as we do now on the SiteStacker side. And then I already kind of referred to this, but kind of not repeating the BPM steps regularly, going back and going, this is good, but how can it be better? And part of that is not appointing an internal specialist to learn the SiteStacker automation tools and learn how to do the BPM approach that we do. So early on, we'll usually do this approach for you as a service, and then we know our own tools. But eventually, you need to know how to do this process, and you need to know these tools so that you can make these modifications without waiting on us. And that's a really key thing we've learned in this. And then the other thing is, if you think about everything I just said, what we've had is a lot of mobilization reps over the course of these years who were basically going from no structure at all. Like, how do you mobilize? I just do it however I want. I do it with email. I do it with whatever, right? Just do it however I want. It's hard to go from doing it however you want to having complete and total structure where there's only one way to do this and you have to do it that way. And organizations definitely have to make a plan for that. Now, you could look at that and go, gosh, that seems too complicated. It seems too painful for us to bother with. The reality is, I would say, no, I think it's very much worth the effort. For many organizations, this process, this is the first time they've made any full commitment to documenting key processes. Sticking with it and redocumenting and reanalyzing will make your mobilization team better. It will make your team stronger, and you will start to see better results pretty much right away. But you've got to kind of stay with it, right? This is not a one and done scenario or a set it and forget it scenario. And also, traditional program management for like, if everyone's just doing it their own way, it's very hard to track results. It's hard to track performance. It's hard to track key performance indicators. But the reality is if you continue to keep structure around this process and keep it into an automated environment, you will be able to report on these key KPIs. You'll be able to eventually analyze where you're succeeding and where you're failing and how you can be better. And the organizations we have that have done that are seeing incredible gains. We're seeing Transworld Radio right now, just in the last year, has had a 4 times increase in missionary candidates. I think that's just incredible. We've seen a couple of other organizations that have reduced the time that it takes to get missionaries to the field by over 50%. And our all-time average is around 50%. And the amazing thing is this yellow line shows us over these years that the attrition, that means missionaries who start the process of kind of onboarding but quit before they get to the field, that's gone down almost exactly with the decrease in the amount of time it takes to get them to the field. So it's definitely worth doing this. It's definitely worth pursuing it. It will change the way you think, and it changes the way you work. And if you're not ready to change the way you think and the way you work, it could be a hard road for you, but it's worth doing. That's what we've seen. Another thing, moving right along, we've wanted to improve donor management. A lot of people don't know this, but we added donor management tools to our SiteStacker offering about 5 years ago. It's really just been in the last kind of 4 years that we've seen donor management be a primary reason why organizations are using SiteStacker. And since 2020, 77% of all the organizations who use SiteStacker are using us as a full comprehensive donor management solution. Here's why I'm interested in that. Well, I'll get into that in a second. This is just kind of a slide to show, okay, well, what were organizations doing before they moved into SiteStacker as a full donor management solution? And here's the numbers on that. 24% were in Blackbaud, 12% were in Salesforce. I won't read them all out, but basically you can see that we have replaced all the typical folks that are out there doing donor management. And you might go, okay, well, that's interesting. Why would someone move from one of these systems into SiteStacker as a full donor management system? And what the real answer to that is that, well, we do have a very strong, robust donor management tool. It is an area where we're heavily investing, so that our goal is to be the very best donor management tool for complex organizations like missionary sending agencies and child sponsorship. We want to be the best on the market. We want to be the very best one for that scenario, for the kind of organization that the ministries we serve are. But the number one value proposition is most certainly providing data continuity. If you think about the slide that I was showing way back earlier that showed all of the systems and their conversion ratios for online giving at 13%, and the point that I made that none of them are really putting any kind of online giving system into place that we know of, and they're not really working on that. And therein lies the problem, because if you're an organization, which if you're on SiteStacker, you are an organization that has gone from 13% to 80+% conversion rates. And if you're doing that, then you are also an organization that is seeing a much higher percentage of your revenue be online and not offline. Now, what that means is the biggest percentage of the revenue that you have in your organization is now coming through automated sources. It's not coming through manual data entry anymore. That whole scenario has changed. And this is now real-time data. It comes in directly from the donors. There's more of it, which provides real-time business intelligence. And if that's living over in some giving system that kind of integrates with your donor management system, but not so well, essentially you're missing the ability to really do forward thinking and powerful kind of data analytical stuff with the biggest part of the data that has the most meaning to your whole organization. So I would propose that this had to happen because you have to have these things integrated. You have to have full data continuity. The bigger part will now moving forward always be coming from what's happening on the front side engagement part of your platform. And if that's not all in one tight unit, you're going to miss opportunities big time. So we're in the not to spend much time here, but we're in the zettabytes era. If 1 gigabyte was a Lego in 2010, the Legos would have gone quarter of the way to the moon. Now they're going to go almost all the way to Mars. The amount of data that's transacting right now is exponentially larger than it was just 5 years ago. And so as a result of that, if you think about the fact that that data is coming in from real-time sources, is our CRM, is our donor management a real-time source? And the actual reality is like, that's why people are coming from Salesforce, because, well, it's a cloud-based CRM. It's still really engineered. It's just a back office solution. It's really not connected for most organizations to any data source of significance other than the data you physically put into it. SiteStacker is really the opposite of that. The vast majority of the data that our donor management system operates with is data that is just natively there because of the great engagement we're getting from the front side of the platform. So if you were an organization who's going, we need a donor management system and we want some features, right? We want these features that we need to have, but also we need to have data continuity, but I can't have both, right? That's an interesting dilemma. So assuming you can have one, but you can't have both, if you're committed to providing all the most trendy features, maybe even that donor management system is like, wow, it's really pretty, or that's really slick, or I really like the way that looks, or I like the way things interact. That's all fine. That's no problem. But if you could have that, but you can't have the data continuity, would you rather have that? Or if you had a system where all of the data had complete continuity as first priority, but maybe you had to sacrifice a couple features. With more than 2 million software applications available for purchase in the current market, what will happen is if we pursue the features, we're going to replace systems over and over and over again because we're shooting for the features, and our data continuity issue is going to get bigger and bigger, become bigger and bigger of a problem. And so what's going to happen is 5 years from now, if you go like, well, if I do that, if I pursue one or the other, but I can't pursue both of those strategies, where will our organization be 5 years from now? What will be more important? Will it be the continuity and the security and the accessibility of our data? Or will it be the features? Because the reality is whatever today's features are, they will change tomorrow and the next day. So whatever features you're in love with today probably won't even be the features you care about in 5 years. But whatever data you can compile with total continuity today will be the intelligence off of which you operate in 5 years. It's really clear which one will have more value. So consolidating the strongest online giving component in missions and in missional organizations with the most powerful recruiting and business process automation utility, now with a complete comprehensive donor management fundraising utility, gives us a way forward where we can do the things we need to do as organizations, and the data continuity problem can be solved. And that's what our solution is limit the input sources. It's not that you can't use some other system that has dashboards or tools that are really good for a particular task. It's just make sure all of the data that's coming into your intelligence environment is coming in through one source. And SiteStacker, in our estimation, provides that source. Like, for instance, if your online giving is in SiteStacker, your offline giving should be too. You should definitely be entering all your check batches into SiteStacker, because now all of your income is coming into one source. Then if for whatever reasons you may have, you want to use Salesforce for a thing or some other system for a thing, you can push that data out to them as a system of reference very easily. It's not complex. It's not expensive. The integration is not hard to deal with, and you're going to have data continuity. But if you say, well, we have a good online giving system over here, and we have a good donor management system over here, and we're always going to be trying to integrate the two things, your data continuity is probably going to be ultimately a mess. And that's why we did it. That's why we focused on donor management. And now we understand that that making our donor management system the most comprehensive over, this is what's happened in 10 years, over the next 5 and 10 years, making our donor management system the most comprehensive solution is what's really valuable, important, kind of moving forward. All right, so now we've come to the point of the time where we're going to do a raffle, and we're also going for the coffee, and then we're also going to do some question and answer. And so moving to the question and answer, do we have questions? Okay. All right, we have some questions that kind of just came in. Let's go ahead and do the raffle while I'm waiting on those questions to come in. And so we're going to go to the wheel of names. All right. And never done this before, so bear with us. And we're going to spin this wheel. And there it goes. Another photograph in great anticipation among those who are watching. And is our winner. All right. Do we have Jade Becker online? Yes. All right, Jade, that's awesome. If you will email, or we'll email you, or we'll get in touch with you to get your mailing address, in this package of delicious Old Florida Coffee Co. coffee will be in other goodies will be mailed out to you right away. Congratulations. And now we're going to take some questions. All right, so one of the first questions is SiteStacker a Christian company? And so I don't know if a company can be Christian, but I am the founder of SiteStacker and of WMTEK, and I am a Christian. And so from a leadership position, we are a missional company. We not only serve just nonprofits, we not only serve just faith-based nonprofits, but we're a unique company that only looks to service Great Commission-based nonprofits. And as a result of that, we believe we are partners and called by God to be in mission with the organizations we serve. And we realize that's not going to be for every organization, and that's fine. There's lots of other companies out there that are secular-minded. We are not. We are Great Commission-minded, and that is 100% of our focus. And so another question is, how are you defining conversion? And that's a great question. The way we're defining conversion is actually it's not just shopping cart conversion. We're actually looking at from the time that someone interacts with a piece of content that would indicate their interest in making a gift. So if you're a missionary sending agency, you're looking at a missionary profile from which you can give to. If you might be looking at a certain giving project that you can make a choice to make a gift to that project from that page. That is the entry point of that funnel. And our 82% conversion is from that point through. If you look at just our shopping cart conversion, it's very, 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 very high in the high 90s. And then that's also the same way we rate conversion for other systems. So that's a really good question. And then how do I get the conversion data for my org in our SiteStacker setup? And that's a great question as well. One of the things we have begun to do is our team is willing to do a 1 year, or if you've been in SiteStacker for more than a year, post deployment review. And we're doing that. We've just did that with Transworld Radio. It was really cool. That's where we found out that they were 4 times in recruiting and 398% increase in online giving in a 12-month period. And if you thought you misheard that, you heard it right. It was really staggering. But based on our analytics that we just shared with you, we had predicted to them a 400% increase based on the platform they were leaving, what we knew the conversion rate was on that platform, and what would happen if they got to 82%. And the actuality is a documented 390%. The 98% gain. So we went back with them. We're doing that with other organizations now, and we're glad to do that with you guys, where we will actually, if you want to do that, just ping our team in support and just say, hey, we'd love to have an analytical review and see where we're at on the SiteStacker platform. For small orgs that cannot bring in development resources like IT personnel, and must use existing staff with low technical skills, what's the prospect of mastering the SiteStacker system to see some of the gains you showcase? All right, so that's a really good question. I think the real answer to that is that we have organizations that have gone both ways. I think the prospect, I don't think you have to be an IT personnel, and I don't think you have to be super high in technical skills, but I will say if that is your starting point, you have to be firmly committed to the process, because it will be obviously harder to learn and to adopt doing more technical things in the SiteStacker platform than if you had those skill sets as a starting point. But we have worked with organizations that have gone both ways, and the real challenge wasn't the starting skill set or the number of staff. We've worked with organizations. I was working with one organization that only, I think, has 3 or 4 home office staff. And then one of them was a full-time staff that only did back office stuff. They have decreased that person's back office activity using SiteStacker by 85%. And then that's allowed that person to then go do other higher performance kind of growth orientated stuff. So that's really good. But here's the rub. Okay. You have to want to do it. You have to really dig in and be committed to learning it. And we have had orgs that have not been. So we've had orgs that we've worked with them, but they don't have this technical skill sets, but also the folks that we've worked with don't always want to really learn. That would be a difficulty. So you have to have both things, in my opinion, but I don't think it has to do with the size of your staff. We can get you there if you want to go there. And we have gotten some pretty small orgs with that kind of a attribute. We've gotten them there. We've saw other ones that have settled in. I mean, frankly, they've stayed with it, but they probably could have gotten better gains if they had pursued it a little more aggressively. So it's kind of up to you. We'll get you there. Can you speak to how your purpose-built websites contribute to conversion rates? Absolutely. I'd love to do that. And actually, that kind of is a great lead-in for, I think, our next webinar, which is in 2 weeks. But that's where Danny will be coming in and really doing, it's really fascinating, actually. He's going to go do a very deep dive into what we've learned. But I will say this, that over these 10 years, and because we're in possession of these analytics, we were not as good at this 10 years ago. We weren't as good at this 5 years ago. What we have learned and some of the things we're currently doing in the most recent iterations of custom website builds with Wycliffe, with Transworld Radio, with Childcare Worldwide, some of these organizations, and the gains that they're getting are just based on some of the absolute newest strategies. But if I don't have time to get into all of that, but if I was going to really focus on that, it's taking all the clutter, pushing it to the side, realizing that your organic traffic is your biggest opportunity. The SEO and everything else is all fine, but don't make your whole strategy to build an SEO based website. Make your strategy to be a high converting website. To be a high converting website, you have to understand what it is you're trying to convert. What do you want to do? Do you want to have more donors? Do you want to have more missionary supporters, more child sponsors? Do you want to have more missionaries in the field? Do you want to send more mission trips out? We have to define what we want to accomplish. We have to work our way back from that and figure out of everything that we can put on our website as content, what is clutter, what makes us more likely to get the conversion, what makes us less likely. And then comes the really hard part of kicking the hornet's nest and working internally in an organization to go, I know that all the different departments want to be represented, but if what the content you're pushing to have on our website doesn't get us more of these things we're trying to get, it's not going to be there, at least not in the initial tier. So our team is really good at this point at figuring that out. And I would be remiss to say that the other side of this is the organizations that have had the greatest gains have also collaborated and had really good thinking staff who know what they're doing on their side. And it's been a collaboration for sure. Can you speak to how can you comment on how customers feel about the CMS compared to other website management systems? Yeah, I can. Generally, if an organization is using some other content management system, like WordPress would be a big one, there's usually a lot of hesitation initially. A lot of times I think the team members maybe that use WordPress, it's their comfort zone. They know how to do it. It's their sweet spot. And then trying to get in, our content management system definitely works different. The user interface is different. And there can be some kind of intrepidation there for sure. What we have seen is, again, if we will commit and go, I'm going to buckle down and learn Site Planner within SiteStacker and take advantage of the business objects, the integrated online giving, the cross-tag, cross-conversion opportunities, the Spark automations, where if people do things on the website, I can automate outcomes in the CRM and back office. If I'll learn that stuff and take advantage of that, I would say generally clients will not leave Site Planner. They absolutely love it. It's the most powerful content management tool that they have used. But if they won't do that, and if they're just kind of going, I just want to do what I did in WordPress, and they don't engage all those other powerful elements, it's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes it can be hit and miss. So, and I think that's to be expected. SiteStacker is an enterprise system. Everything about it is enterprise. Content management is not consumer. It's not prosumer. It is specialist. It is powerful. It is a tool that can accomplish things that other content management systems simply just can't do. With that comes a learning curve. That learning curve requires kind of a dig my heels in. I am going to get my mind around this and become really good at it. And we have a bunch of orgs who have done that. And frankly, the things they've accomplished blow me away. So I think it can go either way. Our goal is always to show your team how you can go the right way with that. And then your goal is always to coach them and really kind of get them to go that way. And if you can really get big wins. All right. Do we have any other questions here? We're coming down to the last 2 minutes. I know we had some polls and some surveys. I don't know whether those polls have those gone out. Okay. We'll skip the polls. I think we're coming to a conclusion here. We do have a handout. Let's add this handout here. Here's the presentation slide deck. Okay. So if you look in handouts, if you want this deck, you can download it. We are also going to be re-airing this webinar next week. That content, the email will go out to you of how you can do that. So if you have folks on your team that you're like, man, for whatever reasons, I really wish they could have seen this, you can send them to that, and there'll be a repeat airing of this, and then you can get them in that. So thank you very much. We've come to the conclusion of our hour. It's 2:59. We appreciate you guys kind of sticking in here. I hope that this has been good for you. Next 2 weeks from now, we will be doing the kind of the how to make your website a conversion machine, the things we've learned and what you can do to make your website a high functioning, high converting, high outcome kind of a utility to get these big gains that we've been talking about. And so we'll be excited to see you guys in 2 weeks for that one. Thanks so much.